What is up, everybody? Welcome to yet another episode of Father Dynasty. I'm your sad Red Sox fan, Chew, here in the manhole, here to talk a little fatherhood and a little Dynasty fantasy football. And with me today is a fellow Dynasty daddy, a frequent flyer, and a future president to his HOA. I'm speaking, of course, fellow degenerate Tyler Daly. How you doing, buddy?
Doing great. It's funny you mentioned the HOA. Just got a letter from them again. But thankfully, this one didn't have anything to do with me. We're actually one of the signs of old age, if I can indulge for a second, is we think people drive way too fast past our house. And really excited because they're now going to be putting in some speed humps. They're not as they're not as popular, I don't think, in Roanoke, at least as when I left. But they're very popular here in the Charlotte area, where they put those like large rolling humps in the middle. And if you go over them at any speed like above 20, like you're gonna feel
bottom out.
It's good, yeah. You're gonna bottom out. You're gonna smack your axles, and so they're putting in a couple of those and a couple of stop signs. So I guess kudos to the people on the board that have been raising hell about that, because I didn't write any letters, but subconsciously they felt that thought. So feeling good about the HOA. I do feel like I'm probably, I don't know, 1 or 2 years removed from running, because every year it's basically uncontested. Like,
really,
they send out the ballot and there'll be like 1 or 2 people extra, and you just type up your own bio about yourself. So I'm just going to make up a bunch of really crazy stuff that's going to make me sound super credible, and I'm just going to become HOA board member. So
I love it. Well, I know you'll institute sweeping changes, but ones that will better the neighborhood for sure. One thing, maybe just have it be one long speed bump. Just have the street be a speed bump. I guess it's just a race street. That's too extreme of an idea.
Just put put those things like on dirt bike tracks, the one, like the real sharp waves, so you're just constantly so no one wants to drive down the street, period. Like, just don't come.
Exactly.
Don't visit our neighborhood.
I like it. Well, as of this recording, we are about a week removed from our rookie draft for a league that we're both in, a league that you're the commissioner of, the League of Extraordinary Degenerates. And right out of the gate, we were drafting as quickly as Kyle Phillips' footwork, but in the final 2 rounds, we were about as gassed as Treylon Burks in day 1 of rookie minicamps. But Titans jokes aside, the little summary of our rookie draft. So the first quarterback was not taken until the 201. Just to clarify, it's the 10 team. And that was actually Kenny Pickett. Ritter was taken at the 203, and then there wasn't another quarterback, Matt Corral, until 302, who was sniped from me 1 pick before. 3 running backs in the first round: Breece Hall, no shocker, at 101, Kenneth Walker, 102, and then James Cook at 109. 7 first-round wide receivers, and Trey McBride, tight end number 1, was taken at the 202. So just kind of thinking back on all that, what would you say is your biggest takeaway from the rookie draft, whether it be how it kind of shook out with the players, how maybe some of our fellow league mates drafted? What was the biggest takeaway for you?
What stood out to me was just that the fantasy draft seemed to run parallel in lockstep to how the actual NFL draft went. I think most of our league, or the majority of our, maybe half to the slight majority, recognized that this draft was not fantasy rich in terms of the talent available and then also the landing spots, because the only time it ever seemed like our draft was held up was when people, it seemed, were pretty obviously trying to trade out of the pick that they currently had. So it was almost, like you mentioned, Kenny Pickett falling all the way until the top of the second round. It was almost as if nobody wanted to pick a quarterback, and you saw that manifested with some of the others that got taken as well. And so that was sort of how the real NFL draft played out, with everybody thinking that Malik Willis, myself included, was going to be the first quarterback off the board, and that we'd still get at least 2 or 3 in the first round with Kenny Pickett and then Desmond Ritter or Matt Corral or somebody sneaking into the back end of the first. And we didn't see some of those guys go until day 3. So I think our fantasy draft that's what stood out to me, is just that everybody seemed to want to trade back.
Yeah, this was the first time where, I know the league, I guess the first season was 2018. And I'm trying to think back to the last NFL draft where there was this much of a slide in quarterbacks, because even if there's not that cornerstone, the Trevor Lawrence, the Andrew Luck type of quarterback, there's still enough value in those other quarterbacks to say, all right, we'll pick somebody in the top 10, top 15. Certainly teams trying to trade into those picks to get that quarterback. And I think with this offseason, a lot of the moves that people did, if it's Pittsburgh getting Trubisky, I mean, heck with, I know Garoppolo was coming off of surgery, but it seemed like the de facto thing was, yeah, well, Garoppolo is obviously going to get moved, and he's the best veteran quarterback on the market, but just where does he choose to go? And again, it could be because of coming off that shoulder surgery, but the man is still in San Francisco. And if they keep flirting with the idea of, hey, maybe Trey Lance isn't living up to what they thought he was, and maybe Garoppolo is going to play. But it was a pretty wild offseason already before the draft, and the draft made it even more crazy. And looking into the actual rookie draft itself, I know you graded these guys out. What would you say is a grade that you would want to share and kind of talk about for the league? And I'm assuming it would be who you graded the worst, just because it's really fun to shit on our league mates. So go ahead and take a deuce.
I'm actually going to steer the opposite direction. The one that I put down that I really wanted to elaborate on, and probably because more privately and not in a derogatory way, but Jacob and I, and now that we have this group chat with us going, I think you've been included in this, is we like to take jabs at some of the more pedestrian owners in our league that aren't as active as the psychos that we are. But to that end, we had been taking some shots at Sneaky Jellyfish, Ryan Yager, for not really being an active participant. Jacob had made a joke to me that, because I have tried to trade for A.J. Brown at least 3 times since he's been in the league from Yager, to no avail, obviously. And now I'm infinitely less interested in him now that he's not wearing a Tennessee uniform. But all that aside, I usually have to text him to let him know the trade has even occurred, because he's not one of those that's logging into the app and all that. So Jacob had made the joke. He didn't even know who AJ Brown was when he picked him. Like he saw him at the top of a power ranking and was like, yeah, sure, whatever. I thought he had a really, really good draft. In the first round, taking Treylon Burks, he got Dameon Pierce in the second. Then he came back and got Davis Price in the third. Good flyer. You always want to try to get a piece of the Shanahan run game if you can, because it seems like he's going to utilize at least 2 guys. He got Sam Howell and Isaiah Likely, who pre-draft a lot of people thought was going to be the first tight end off the board. And in an offense with Baltimore that's going to run a lot of 2 tight end sets, he's probably going to see the field a decent amount. I know they took Kohler as well, or I think that's how you pronounce it, Kohler. So there's going to be probably going to be some opportunity there. So I just looked at, he went wide receiver, running back, quarterback, tight end, and he got somebody who could arguably be an impact player at every single position on his roster. We don't know what's going to happen in Washington, but obviously Carson Wentz isn't exactly somebody that I don't think Washington is counting on to be there long term. It's just one of those, yeah, sure, if it works out. And that's the way they'll also be approaching Sam Howell, because they didn't have to spend the kind of draft capital that many people thought they might to get a quarterback like that. So I'm getting a little long-winded, but just my point overall is that I think that he has an impact player potentially at every single startable position in fantasy.
That's a very good point. And yeah, looking at that draft, I think it was one, I can't remember the grade I had on here. I think it was maybe a B- on there, but I mean, that is true. And certainly if you compare it to not just how his draft was, but like you said, how maybe it's gone previously and how it took a shift to the positive this draft, maybe makes it even exponentially better, comparatively speaking. I guess in the spirit of shitting on people, which is what I'm about to do. So I cannot get over Drama Beats taking Christian Watson at the 105 or the 106. I believe it was the 105.
105. Yeah, 105.
I saw that and I audibly said, I said it out. I think I was at work. I think I was at work and I just out loud at my desk was like, what just happened? My coworker was concerned. I was like, nothing really happened, but like, what the fuck just happened? I feel like the first round is not where you reach for anything. It's not like I feel like this guy can do it. And I mean, I felt like too landing spot dependent in terms of him going to Green Bay. It felt like the same thing of like, you can't warrant Christian Watson going that early. You certainly can't warrant Sky Moore going that early, but that's kind of the same idea in terms of a guy that people are either all the way in or all the way out. And then because of landing spot, people that were already all the way in are like, best guy in the draft. And at that time, one of my favorite picks until a recent signing of Jarvis Landry, with Chris Olave, of course, being on the board, Jamison Williams still being on the board. It was one of those ones where it's like, I feel like it sets so far back, considering I believe he also didn't have a second round pick. And later on, it was, picking Jelani Woods and then Justin Ross.
Yeah.
I mean, I know once you get to the third, fourth, and fifth, you're kind of getting your guys. Certainly in this draft, it's kind of just, it was wide open in terms of the value perception there. But that was my worst draft grade. Although, I mean, I would love for me to be proved wrong. I know Watson is an athletic marvel, but I know those guys are very, very much dice rolls in the NFL.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. The only thing that I would say in his defense, and I agree with you, I'm just trying to put on my rose-colored glasses for him, is like you said, he didn't have a second-round pick. So maybe he had Christian Watson ID'd as one of those guys that he was, let's say he has a second-round pick, maybe Christian Watson falls to him. Because I don't think, based on how the rest of our draft played out, like you said, with Olave, Wilson, Williams, Cook, Sky being, sorry, I'm reading our board and just there's filth everywhere all over it. So I'm trying to determine what's actually real. It's hard to remember Sky.
Read those names.
His name is Ice Swallow Sky Vodka on the board. So, but maybe he felt he just had to go get his guy. But I'm with you. I approach these, or try to approach these drafts, very much as almost like you would a betting market or a stock price market, in that price matters. And if I would have had the fifth pick, that's way too expensive for Christian Watson. I get liking your guy, but at the same time, with Garrett Wilson, Jamison Williams, Chris Olave still on the board, you have to like those guys a little bit better, I feel.
Yeah, I kind of see it more as like as much as you possibly can. Certainly in the first and second rounds, you draft for value, but you can trade for need. Like if you wait until the offseason and like you rookie minicamp or something like that, and Watson has, with the stuff nowadays, like if someone like Jamar Chase last offseason, let Watson have a bad day in camp. Let him drop a couple of balls. Let him run a terrible route and look awful, and go to that manager that day and be like, hey, I'll take him off your hands for a second or so. Like you can always, before the season starts, get your guy. Certainly if it's a non-quarterback. But I'm again very excited to see that offense in terms of what they're going to do in Green Bay, and hopefully Aaron Rodgers is not. He can definitely elevate his surrounding cast, but he doesn't have much of one. So shifting your eyeballs over to your own draft, how do you feel about what you left in the rookie draft in terms of your picks? I know we've of course had a trade as well, but just maybe as the draft as a whole, how did you feel how you left it?
You're talking about my team personally?
Yeah.
Yeah. So as you can see, both with my trade with Brooks, Tepper's Brass Balls, I looked at my roster this offseason and really felt that I wanted to address getting some more pass catchers. I traded you Amari Cooper. I traded you Calvin Ridley, which we'll maybe debrief that at another time. That worked out a little bit better for me, at least in the short term, than I could have anticipated. But point being, I was looking at my roster, and maybe Chris Godwin is my best receiver left, coming off an ACL injury. An aging Tom Brady, he did get the long-term deal, so I do feel a little bit more comfortable about him moving forward. But I ID'd wide receiver as something I really wanted to improve upon. So getting CeeDee Lamb, I feel like when we graded these, I didn't go as far as to grade other people's trades, but selfishly, I'm going to include my trade in this grade because that's a big piece for me to add with CeeDee Lamb. So then going out and, I didn't have a first-round pick. going out and getting David Bell and George Pickens in the second round, again, trading with you and also acquiring Juju off that trade. Who knows what he's going to turn out to be, but I'm just trying to find some of those, B and C tier wide receivers potentially that have some upside. So Juju's getting a new landing spot and a new quarterback, so maybe he thrives. And then we talked about before the draft my love for David Bell. I thought he was potentially like a fringe first rounder. With the way that our draft played out, not so much. I think it made sense to where he fell for me. And then George Pickens is just a true ceiling pick. The Steelers have a phenomenal track record of drafting wide receivers. I don't need to list them. Everybody knows it. So anybody that they value as a second round pick at wide receiver, that's gonna catch my eye. So I was excited about getting both of those guys. And then rounding out, taking a flyer on Tyquan Thornton. Conversely, the Patriots suck at drafting wide receiver. I feel like every year we're talking about somebody like N'Keal Harry that they spend high-end draft capital on and then they don't do anything with. But I felt like, I gave myself a B minus actually. And, I felt okay with it. I would have liked to get a running back, but I just didn't feel like anybody was a value at the picks I had available. I kept finding myself liking taking shots on wide receivers instead.
Yeah, and like you said, I know we had that trade that allowed you to get Pickens and Bell back to back, and I mean those are two guys to where certainly with situation like you said with Pickens going to a wide receiver factory in Pittsburgh, and Bell going into his biggest competition is Donovan Peoples-Jones, I guess. I think those are two where it's like one of those is bound to hit, and hit can be kind of a sliding scale in terms of what that means, but at a minimum, I would say one is going to be someone who can be a consistent producer for you in fantasy going forward, as early as this season, certainly with David Bell's opportunity in Cleveland. So I definitely like your draft. I had actually given us both Bs. I think initially I was B minuses, but then I was like, let's bump us both up another half. But I
gave you the same thing too. I gave you a B minus, which is what I gave myself. So
yeah, it was one of those where it's just like, I know we'd done a couple of trades, one as a part of the draft with rookie picks, and also just separate from that, like players that are like with Juju and everything. So some of those, like, I don't know how that influences the draft itself, because I could have made a bunch of trades, only made one pick, but made trades outside of that would have bettered my team. And it's like, well, my draft itself maybe wasn't the best, but if I moved that value for maybe better value in my perception, then I win in the end, in my opinion. But
yeah,
in terms of some of the moves, I know I missed out on Matt Corral by one pick, as I am the current owner of Sam Darnold, and presumed one of those two guys are Jimmy Garoppolo or Baker Mayfield, who I, of course, also own Baker Mayfield. All I need to do is get Jimmy G from Harris, and I'm pretty sure I've got the starting QB for the Panthers. It's either that or Matt Rule is going to lace up and be a ploach. I'm not really sure, but I missed out on him by one pick, but I'm incredibly glad. I do believe in Zach Wilson, certainly with what they're doing with surrounding him with all that talent. At a minimum, I think he's going to do average or above average. But when he was coming into the league, I thought it was completely overblown in terms of his talent. And I do think he can maybe live up to some bit of that, but I don't know if he's going to become what everybody maybe thought he was initially. So being able to move him and then get a stud in T. Higgins, and of course, I know we had our deal with Juju and Elijah Mitchell. Of course, basically outside of Leonard Fournette, I've had a number of moves this offseason, but as it stands today, basically it was Leonard Fournette and then a bunch of guys that are technically running backs. So being able to get Elijah Mitchell was huge in terms of, I know it's a bit of a committee cluster, not just a committee, but a committee cluster in San Fran. But I do think Elijah Mitchell is going to be the mainstay there, whatever that means, at least for the season. So we'll see how that goes. And I felt like I reached a little bit for Isaiah Spiller. That was actually my first pick in the draft since I'd already done a bunch of trading back. But as you know, I attempted to get Eckler off of you, which I didn't think was going to happen, but I was just hoping you were like really tired and just like didn't want to put up a fight. But that didn't happen. But it's one of those where it's been a revolving door of them trying to figure out who can work with Eckler, because Eckler himself, I know had heard an interview and saying he doesn't himself want to take on the workload of a bell cow. And I mean, his size, his age, I'm not saying he doesn't have the talent to do it, but I think in that high-powered of an offense, certainly now they have even more weapons. They're building out the defense a little bit more. The division just became a lot more competitive. So he understands he wants his career to be going as long as possible, and he needs to have someone who can be the Robin to his Batman. And let's be honest, Roundtree, Kelly, Jackson, none of those guys have been it, not even close. So if you can bring in one guy who he's bigger, he's a bit more of a bruiser, not as much of a bruiser for his size that you would expect, but does have some receiving chops. I feel like you don't have a huge drop off where it's so much thunder and lightning. It's guys that can complement one another a little bit. And I think they can both help out Justin Herbert as well. But so
I really sorry to cut you off. I really like the Isaiah Spiller pick. I imagine that if Dameon Pierce had not gone one in front of you, you probably would have gone with him, correct?
1,000%.
I know you were liking him pre-draft. So, but yeah, I agree. I'm in lockstep with you all the way about the Isaiah Spiller pick. And I watched a decent amount of him in college. He plays in the same division as my wife's alma mater of Mississippi State. So, and he's just a good player. I typically get Phil Steele's magazine every year before the college football season starts, and I take a look at who his top draft prospects are and sort of go through and highlight whenever, there's a decent game on that Saturday I watch. And I watched a good amount of Isaiah Spiller. He was always in the mix with Texas A&M, even from his freshman year, I believe. And you're exactly right. He does have some receiving chops too. It's actually the rare situation though, where I feel like he elevates Austin Eckler to an extent. I know that sounds counterintuitive because he's going to be taking away some touches, but I just think that Eckler is not, I know, and everybody knows this. Austin Eckler is just one of those guys that it's quality, not quantity with him. How much better is your football team going to be if you hand the ball off to Austin Eckler 5 extra times a game? Probably not very. But if you split those carries off and you find some extra time for him to be a receiver or just to be on the field in like a 2-back set or something, I think that just the arrows pointing up on that Chargers offense as a whole because of that Isaiah Spiller pick. And I think he's going to do well. Like you said, he does have receiving chops. I don't know if you've seen this clip, but I remember this game vividly. Last year, they went to Colorado, a tough road game early in the season, and he made, like, from what I remember, it was a pretty contested touchdown catch, and I think it was A&M's only touchdown in that game. I think they won like 10-7 or something. So he definitely has some receiving chops.
And one person who I'm curious just to ask you, not on the show notes specifically, but did you watch any bit of Cincinnati this past year? Yeah.
I mean, with them being such a competitive team for the college football playoff, absolutely.
So as you know, with the group text that we spoke on, I'm not a big Desmond Ridder fan. I think he's maybe half of what Alex Smith ever was. But I think there's a place for that in today's NFL, certainly, with his size, with his athletic ability. I know there's a place for that with a good system and everything. But one guy who was, I think, somewhat his saving grace in that offense being Alec Pierce. I picked him. He was kind of in the last week or so before the draft, someone that I kind of caught on to a little bit more. Could be a boomer bust given kind of his profile, but I'm buying into the fact that the big athletic dude that could at least work in the red zone and play, again, going to the Colts with a new quarterback and Matt Ryan, if he buys in, if, Matt Ryan takes him under his wing and says, hey, I'll teach you how to be productive in the NFL. What do you think about Alec Pierce from what you've seen?
I like Alec Pierce, just an overall good football player. Probably one of those guys that I would characterize as being a jack of all trades, master of none. He's just I like guys that come from situations similar to Desmond Ridder. Anybody with Cincinnati, or to insert another similar type program that has a lot of success. I mean, those guys won a ton of football games together. I know it was, albeit against what a lot of people would consider subpar competition, but we see guys from these conferences go pro and be successful all the time. And not to get too long-winded here, but looking at Alec Pierce, and David Bell, guys like that, they're almost walking into, dare I say, like a better situation than Garrett Wilson and Jamison Williams and Chris Olave, because there's direct path to them playing. Now, I know that the draft capital is there with all those guys I just mentioned. They're obviously going to play. There's no question about it. But when you look at Alec Pierce, I mean, the Colts have Michael Pittman, and that's pretty much it. Paris Campbell can't stay on the field. I think they still have, oh gosh, and I'm blanking on his name. He used to be on my roster. I think Brooks has him now.
Well, Pascal went to the Eagles.
Okay, so never mind. I was going to say Pascal.
They do have Ashton Doolin, though. Sneaky guy.
Yeah. And, you know, they've got Mo Alley Cox, and now they've got I can't think of the dude's name. The guy from UVA that Drama Beats took. Help me out.
From UVA.
The
Jelani Woods?
Yeah, Jelani Woods. So, yeah, I like Alec Pierce. I think that's a great pick. I think he gets on the field right away, and I think he personally is going to do well. I mean, I think the Colts are going to be, as much as I hate to say it, I think the Colts are going to be a good team. I think they've got the inside track to win the AFC South this year.
I like that. Well, getting into as I guess we're making our yearbook here for the League of Extraordinary Degenerates, getting into the Degenerate Rookie Draft Superlative. So for the best draft, who would you consider to have had the best draft in the league?
So I had a 1A, 1B. I already talked about my love for Sneaky Jellyfish, his draft. I thought it was very strong. And then our defending champion, Slap and Pickle, he had a great draft. And some of this it's about opportunity. So I think there are people that didn't have a great volume of picks or picks in the first round. I look at like your team, for example, like you maximized what was available to you. Somebody else I gave a high grade to was Fabs. I felt like he maximized what was available to him, but with Mike, Slap and Pickle getting Olave and Sky Moore, two potentially impact wide receivers right out of the gate. I don't know how to pronounce this dude's last name, Tyler Algier. I'll just say.
Oh, that's my guy right there out of BYU. Oh yeah.
So I'd be probably a lot more excited about him if he went to somebody other than the Atlanta Falcons.
He's a converted linebacker.
Is he really?
Oh yeah, not kidding. I believe I tweeted some comparison in like a very backwards way of saying, well, Javonte Williams was a converted linebacker. And then I said, I'm not saying he's Javonte Williams, but that's pretty cool though.
Yeah, that is cool. So yeah, I think those two had the best draft that stood out to me. What do you think?
Slap and Pickle was the same one. I mean, starting out, I know that the first emergency break pull was at that pick 6 in terms of, I guess, I don't know if it was not wanting to pick Olave or just not wanting to pick period and not even considering it and then being like, okay, I guess it'll be Olave. But that was somebody who I know before the Jarvis Landry selection, although I think he'll still be fine. Olave is going to, I think, have either be the wide receiver 1 for rookie wide receivers or at worst wide receiver 2 for rookies. Sky Moore, yeah, certainly an opportunity there in Kansas City. Algier was a guy that I was incredibly high on. I would have probably only gotten him if he would have fallen into the 3rd. Obviously, he got pretty close, but didn't quite get there. Dotson fell that far, considering he's a first-round wide receiver. Why not? And Corral, of course, I got snatched away one pick before me, but completely agree. And now let's take a turn for the worst here. So, worst draft. Who would you say?
Worst draft, I had to give to Kamara's a bitch, Wolfgang Golke. So he did not have a first round pick. I can't remember exactly how he ended up trading out of that round. I didn't trace back his pick lineage or anything like that, but I believe I got the number 8 that I had before I traded it to Brooks came from you, which came from Wolf. So I got
his a while ago. Yeah. I think that was the Wentz trade.
Okay. Yeah. So at some point you acquired his pick. So he didn't have a pick in the first round, which automatically hurt him. And then with his second round pick, I felt like there was just, after I took David Bell and George Pickens, I would have bet an absurd amount of money that he was going to take Jahan Dotson right there. And I think he absolutely should have taken Jahan Dotson. I'm not saying that Rachaad White isn't going to be productive. We know that it's valuable to have the pass catching running back in a Tom Brady offense, but it's so far from a guarantee. And when you have a guy like Jahan Dotson who has first round draft capital available to you, I almost felt like I was beating myself up a little bit for not taking Jahan Dotson. But again, referencing back to before, I just felt like Pickens was just a ceiling pick that I didn't want to pass up on. I felt like he could potentially be a star, where I maybe didn't see that in Dotson. So that I felt like that was a huge miss for him, overlooking him and taking Rachaad White. I think Pacheco, I think is how you pronounce it, is a massive reach. I believe he took him, I want to say, was in the third or
might have been a fourth.
Yeah, fourth. Anyway, I can't find it on the board right now, but I didn't feel like that was a great pick. Also, funny, you should Google that guy, because he doesn't even have a Wikipedia page. And if you Google almost anybody in this draft, up in the top right corner of Google, their picture comes up and a little bit of, a link to their wiki.
Yeah.
Isaiah Pacheco doesn't have a Wikipedia page or any information. It's kind of a Google
lay low.
Yeah, Google desert. And then I didn't do enough research on the pronunciation of these guys' names. I get the Romeo Dubs pick in the fourth round, but the road to fantasy basements is littered with Green Bay Packers wide receivers that everybody tried to get a piece of, like Equanimeous St. Brown and
Geronimo Allison.
Yeah, Geronimo
who just who signed with another team, I think, a couple days ago.
The Raiders, right? Maybe.
That's right.
Yeah,
I thought he was done. I thought he actually retired. I didn't know
I think he was on the Lions last year and he got hurt.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, like Jake Kumaro, the list goes on. So I get wanting to involve yourself in the Green Bay offense, but overall, I just felt like he had a super, super unexciting draft, and I feel like I would be talking a lot differently about. I'd bump him up. I had him down as a C-. I'd bump him up probably to a B- if he had just taken Jahan Dotson, honestly.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to beat a dead horse in saying who I thought had the worst one, because I think I've highlighted that before for reasons I previously explained. But it's funny that you say that about Wolf, because that will be spoken about in two more superlatives. And speaking of the best value, and you'll appreciate that one. But biggest reach, which player do you think was the biggest reach? Any round, anybody?
Yeah, not to be redundant, but it has to be Christian Watson at number 5. It's just with the guys that were there on the board before Olave, before Wilson, I probably still would have called it a reach to take Kenny Pickett at number 5, but I think I would feel better at taking Kenny Pickett at number 5 than taking Christian Watson. Aaron Rodgers has to be one of the most temperamental NFL players of all time in terms of how he links up or doesn't link up with his wide receivers. And I just think how the Packers went 2 defensive players in the first round. They have Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon. They're building almost like a Tennessee Titans type style team, which ironically Matt LaFleur, but came from Tennessee. They're going to run the piss out of the ball, and Aaron Rodgers is going to throw it, obviously, but I don't think there's necessarily going to be as much opportunity there. I'm not excited about Christian Watson at all. So I think it was pretty obvious that he was a reach, and I'm disappointed that Jacob wasn't able to make it tonight, because I wanted to throw this jab. So hopefully he will hear this. But I also think that taking Kenny Walker, Texas Ranger, at number 2 was low key a reach. With Drake London, Treylon Burks, and any of the other wide receivers, but I kind of had London and Burks in their own 1A, 1B tier, just because they're both walking into situations where they're clearly, if not with Drake London, you have Kyle Pitts, so maybe not the best wide receiver, but they're going to be one of the top 2 options on their offense. Kenny Walker, I know Jake likes him. He came from Wake Forest. He transferred to Michigan State. He's a great player. But I think you've heard me say multiple times that I have zero interest in guys that carry the ball between the 20s, especially for bad football teams. And the Seahawks are going to suck. And I realize Dynasty is what it is, and you're investing in players for the long term. But with running backs particularly, if they don't hit in their first 5 years, like you're maxing them out on that first contract.
Mm-hmm.
Very few guys make it to that second deal and are still competing at a fantasy elite level. So I just already consider this year like a waste for Kenny Walker because, and I could be very wrong. Maybe like at year end, you're going to do like a cold takes thing, and you're going to be able to clip this when Kenny Walker is like the RB1 or something, and Drew Lock and Kenny Walker win the division and make the playoffs. But I thought that was a little bit of a reach too.
Well, that was not the person I was going to mention, of course, was Christian Watson as well. But I'm glad you said that about Kenny Walker because a shameless plug of articles related to this podcast, I, of course, wrote something on Kenny Walker in terms of seeing him since 2018, which was the first year. That was when Rashad Penny was drafted in the tail end of the first round. Since then, looking at the pattern of the targets to the running backs, of which the Seahawks have been bottom third in the league since 2018, and we're actually dead last in this previous year. That was a lot of injuries. DJ Dallas actually led the running backs in targets. Take that what you will, but looking at that, I found it seemed as though his ceiling for Kenneth Walker, assuming he was the guy that was leading the targets in the backfield, was going to be RB 15, 14. And I mean that as the ceiling. I'm implying that he's going to be basically as good of a runner as Nick Chubb. It was you're basically having to be Nick Chubb, and no one's Derrick Henry because no one's Derrick Henry. I don't need to make that argument, but it basically had to be Chubb. The best that he ever did in PPR formats was, I believe, RB 11. And I understand that he was splitting with Kareem Hunt for many years at this point. But, I mean, Kenneth Walker is not just going to be given every single bit of action and touch in that backfield. And what do those touches look like with the law firm of Locke and Smith? I mean, there's no fear instilled in either of those quarterbacks. And I think that there's not going to be as open a running lanes that Kenneth Walker would need to be able to live up to a Chubb or Chubb plus level to even sneak into the RB10 talk. So kind of like what you're talking about, it's not a good offense to invest in for a running back to have to overcome such huge hurdles.
And the other thing, too, is that Pete Carroll has shown time and time again in his tenure with Seattle that he really doesn't care all that. He's one of the coaches that doesn't care all that much about draft capital. Most organizations care deeply about their coaches fall in lockstep with the GM. Guys that get taken in the first and second round are given every opportunity to succeed. And I'm not saying that he's stonewalling those guys, but you just mentioned Rashad Penny, taken in the first round several years ago. I know he's battled injuries, but there have been times where Rashad Penny's been healthy, and Chris Carson is the starter. They go back a few other years and years ago. The organization goes out and trades for Matt Flynn from Green Bay. They take Russell Wilson. They had given Matt Flynn like an egregious contract and made him the starter. And they take Russell Wilson in the third round and immediately plug him into the starting role. Trade capital and investment be damned. Like, Pete Carroll is going to play who Pete Carroll wants to play. So there's just, to me, like a non-zero chance that Kenny Walker is like the 2B or Chris Carson's probably on the outside looking in, but I just think it's far from a guarantee where like you usually see like the Colts take Jonathan Taylor in the second round. We know that he's going to get a lot of opportunity. Denver taking Javonte Williams, like he's going to get a lot of opportunity. I'm not as comfortable saying that Pete Carroll is going to, give him his due share given the draft capital that was invested into him.
I completely agree. And yeah, this will be one where I'll clip either way. We're either both right or we're both wrong, and I'm very excited to find that out. But in talking about the best value, and And I'm going to jump in just to give mine because it kind of ties back to 2 questions ago. So I will say I loved getting Zamir White at the 401. That's a separate thing. I thought that was good value. I think that's great opportunity. Of course, Josh Jacobs didn't get his 5th-year option picked up. It's a new regime in there, but I know they have, Brandon Bolden, Kenneth Drake is still there for another year, I want to say. Kenyon Drake, not Kenneth Drake. It's a different guy. But Khalil Shakir, you got him at the 506. And the main reason why that's the best value is because technically he was taken almost a full round prior and he was typed into the Google Doc, but then he was unpicked for Romeo Dubs. And then Shakir just kept just scooting along all the way, almost a full round later. And you were able to snipe him in the middle of the 5th round. So I thought that was an incredible value.
I was beating myself up, as I'm sure you remember in the group chat, at the 406, trying to decide between Khalil Shakir and Tyquan Thornton. Mm-hmm. And I got immediately heartbroken because I think I was I have the Google Sheet app on my phone, and I believe I was actually in the spreadsheet when I saw Khalil Shakir get typed in. It's like, that's a good pick by Wolf there. And then he deleted it. And I was like, oh, someone's playing a joke. Like, someone's going to type in something filthy and replace Khalil Shakir with something. But he changed his pick. And then surely I thought, well, he just put Khalil Shakir on the map. Somebody else between now and my next pick is going to say, oh, who's this guy that was up here on the board for a couple minutes? But he either was of no interest to anybody or a lot of people just didn't see him. So thank you for the tip of the cap. Obviously, a little bit of backstory to those that aren't privy to our text messages. His older brother was one of the trainers at the gym I used to work out at. So we used to chop it up every Monday morning and talk about Khalil's game from the past weekend at Boise State. So I watched a decent amount of Khalil Shakir in college. Tip of the cap to you as well. I love that Zamir White pick. I had ID'd him before the draft. I didn't have a 3rd round pick. I probably would have taken him in the 3rd round if I had one, but wasn't willing to trade up necessarily after already trading with you. And then I think I'm being obvious, sort of low hanging fruit here, but Jahan Dotson at the end of the 2nd to slap and pickle, I thought was an incredible value. He just has that 1st round draft capital. The Washington football team, the Commanders.
No, they didn't change it again. Never mind. Go ahead.
Yeah. They don't have. He's not going to have a lot of target competition. Logan Thomas is there. Obviously, he's coming off an ACL injury, and then it's basically him and Terry McLaurin. So he's going to have opportunity to get onto the field. The quarterback situation we all know is a little bit sticky, but that 1st round draft capital is going to keep him there for either a successful Carson Wentz or whatever comes next, whether that's a successful Sam Howell or insert next quarterback next year when they are terrible again and draft high.
Yeah, and in regards to that team, I mean, Sam Howell, as you know, has been that was the guy that I was hoping the Panthers would have gotten. If you're gonna tell me that the Panthers could have, I know they didn't have the pick per se, they could have waited another full 2 rounds, and instead of getting Matt Corral, could have gotten Sam Howell at the 501 in the NFL draft, I would have lost my mind. That would have been incredible. I mean, that's an unbelievable value, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. But jumping to the final piece here. So we've got rookie minicamps underway, and what is a storyline or a player specifically that you are following for Dynasty's sake? So I know there's maybe personal interest in, say, Titans, but Dynasty specifically, maybe someone on your team that you're following the news on.
Yeah, I'm going to follow the news out of Titans camp because I'm interested to see, I think I'm pronouncing it right, Okonkwo. The tight end that they took, I keep joking that his first name is Chorizo. Obviously it's not Chorizo. I mean, no disrespect, but I think that the Titans went out and got Austin Hooper on the cheap after Cleveland cut him. So Austin Hooper's obviously going to have the inside track, I think, to start. But much like I referenced with the Ravens earlier, the Titans are usually a team that runs a lot of 2 tight end sets, run-heavy packages for Derrick Henry. So there's going to be some opportunity for Okonkwo to get on the field, and I'm interested to see if he kind of pushes Austin Hooper a little bit, because I believe Okonkwo ran a 4.5 40, and for somebody who can move like that at the tight end position, he's somebody I'm probably going to have to be patient with. But I'm interested in seeing how he progresses through rookie minicamp and into the deeper into the offseason, because I think if he gets the opportunity, he's an athletic freak and somebody that has a high ceiling but also a low floor. And then the other one I wrote down, sort of low-hanging fruit, but I know that the veterans haven't reported yet, but the quarterback battles in Pittsburgh and in Atlanta. Obviously, you think likely that Pickett is more likely to start there because of the first-round draft capital invested, but I don't think Mitch Trubisky is necessarily just going to roll over. I think, as much as I like to shit on him because he went to North Carolina first off and did not play successfully against Virginia Tech, I think he got a raw deal in Chicago with how things were handled. And now that we know Matt Nagy maybe isn't necessarily a great coach, I think that he deserves a second chance. I'm a little bit bummed personally that he is in a situation that he has to battle for the job, because I was kind of hoping that maybe he would go somewhere that he would just straight up get the keys, and maybe he will, but that seems increasingly unlikely with a first-round pick. And we know from, like D, Marcus Mariota has bones like glass. So Desmond Ridder is probably going to play this year, whether it be injury or him just beating Marcus Mariota straight up.
So what you're saying is Marcus Mariota is Cole Armstrong?
Yeah, maybe you should start punting the ball.
No, it's that's one thing with how much of a non-believer I am in Ridder. I think that he could not have gone to a better opportunity in what that offense, I think, could become. And it's also with having Mariota in front of him, again, regardless, even if Mariota plays the entire season, is healthy and plays well, I think what the offense does from Mariota to Ridder, I don't know that it would change dramatically. So I think that that's a benefit in terms of with the players and his surrounding cast as they continue to develop and everything. It's not going to be whenever the time is that Ridder takes the keys, whether it be this season or next. It won't be an abrupt adjustment, and I feel like it might be maybe more of a seamless thing where he can feel more comfortable. He can, watching him play at Cincinnati, one thing I will give him to a T, he did improve every single year in his passing, and he threw with incredible confidence a good amount of the time. I think a lot of it maybe it did have to do with the scheme and everything, and maybe the talent that he was playing against. But again, if he's playing with guys that are very comfortable with the scheme, it's the same thing, and he has maybe a year or so to kind of get that experience under his belt and just kind of be able to watch that. It's, again, I'm a Panthers fan. It's not a very good division, not the worst division, but not a great division. So I think it may give him a chance to kind of grow as the division itself is improving, and he can grow to be, certainly not the bottom quarterback in the division, because, again, reminder, I am a Panthers fan. But one guy that I've been looking at, I did mention him before, Alec Pierce. He's gonna be the 2. He's gonna be the Z, I believe is the term. And I do mean that specifically in Football Reference, of course. And it used to be who's going to play alongside T.Y. Hilton, and now it has been who is going to play alongside Michael Pittman. It's Alec Pierce. Anyone who is currently on the roster, I do like Ashton Dulin and I sincerely do. I'm someone who likes those obscure players that 8 times out of the year they did something good, and that's just, just do more of that, and then you just become the starter. That doesn't exactly always work out that way, but Alec Pierce, I feel like with his pedigree from Cincinnati, his build, his frame, what he does in the red zone, again, as I emphasized before, Matt Ryan being the quarterback, there's only so many people that Matt Ryan can throw the ball to. And I understand that in his past life in Atlanta, it's not to say that he had a bevy of weapons. In his prime, it was just Julio Jones. Eventually, it was also Calvin Ridley. He at one point had Austin Hooper. he certainly did okay with just having one or two guys.
Don't forget about Roddy White.
He had Roddy White.
Yeah,
he absolutely did.
Roddy White.
That's right. But I think that Alec Pierce is going to do incredibly well. If anything, it maybe will not be a high volume rookie year, but I do think he's going to do well in the red zone. And I do think that, I mean, the Colts as an entire team, certainly with their defense as well, I think they're going to be in scoring positions aplenty. And I think Alec Pierce, of course, Jonathan Taylor in the running game as well, are both going to benefit tremendously. But to wrap this whole thing up, as the guest, although let's be real, you are the co-host, you get the last word. What would you like to say? What would you like to let the Father Dynasty community know about you, about your Dynasty experience, about fatherhood? What do you want to let us know?
I'm going to shout out my wife. That's always worth the brownie points. But first off, yesterday was her birthday. So again, happy belated birthday to the missus. But also, she just got a promotion at work, and we'll be taking over production of all high school, college, and professional lacrosse for ESPN. So anytime you turn on Watch ESPN or ESPNU or wherever, you may take in your lacrosse. I know you're a big lacrosse guy, too. So
Lax Pro.
Yeah. So anywhere that you're going to watch it, Megan's going to be helping put that content on your device, whatever, however you might be taking it. So very excited for her and proud of her for the hard work that she's put in on college baseball last year, sort of in like an assistant role. And now she's welcome to the big show, Premier League lacrosse.
I mean,
who knew there was a Premier League lacrosse? Not this guy. But now I'm locked
now this
in.
guy.
Now I'm locked in.
Well, I mean, I'm going to go ahead and I don't know if we have a formal celebration here, but I'm going to give that a hell yeah. That's all. That's a cheers. We can do that. Well, Tyler, I appreciate you coming on. Appreciate you taking the time, and I know you're going to have yourself a fun weekend. But congrats on good things going on with the family, and looking forward to catching up with you very soon.
Always a pleasure. Looking forward to it.